Do you really think you deserve a seat at this table, gold digger? The words cut through the warm air of the wedding night like a cold blade. Every sound shattered. The music stopped mid-note. Laughter died in throats. The crystal chandeliers trembled slightly, scattering light into 1,000 shards that flickered like they too feared the storm about to break. At the head of the table stood Eleanor Whitmore, 62 years old, draped in a deep red silk shawl, her posture straight and commanding the stance of a woman long accustomed to ruling every room she entered. Her voice carried the tone of power, refined by decades' dry cold, and leaving no space for defiance. In front of her sat Maya Carter, the bride of the evening, the only black woman in the gilded ballroom, wearing a pristine white wedding gown, and the CEO of Carter Equity Partners, a company none of the Whitmores truly believed she deserved to own. The room fell deathly silent. In the far corner, a champagne bottle worth $1,000 popped open at the wrong time, the dry crack echoing like mockery. Jake Whitmore, the groom, pale and trembling, whispered, "Mother, please don't." But Eleanor didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone except Maya. "Don't pretend, Jake. Don't act like this is normal. A woman like her does not belong in this house." Her eyes were sharp as razors. She leaned forward slightly, her diamond earrings swaying, catching the light like slivers of ice. "Do you really think money can make you one of us? You've built nothing. You're just marrying your way up." The air thickened heavy with discomfort. Guests in $1,000 tuxedos lowered their eyes, pretending to adjust their napkins. A reporter from Society and Vows discreetly slid her phone under the table and hit record. In the back, Tasha Bennett, a young black waitress carrying a tray of champagne, froze mid-step. Her eyes followed Maya, an expression of awe and pain all at once, as if she were watching herself in another life. But Maya said nothing. Not a word, not a movement. Her hands rested on the table, still as stone. Her heart pounded, yet her face remained calm, almost ruthless in its composure. She had lived in rooms where worth was measured by skin color, not achievement. And tonight she knew she was not just a guest here. She was a mirror held up to this family's conscience. Eleanor smiled, triumphant, mistaking silence for surrender. She didn't realize that in that silence, a storm was already gathering. Jake turned to his wife, his lips trembling. "Maya, please." She looked at him, her eyes cold, yet sorrowful. She didn't have to speak. Her thoughts screamed louder than words. "I told you, Jake. They were never going to accept us. I only wanted one peaceful night. But they chose war." At the other end of the table, Charles Whitmore, the patriarch, cleared his throat, trying to salvage the family's dignity. "Eleanor, that's enough. This is Jake's wedding, not a courtroom." But she lifted her chin and snapped, "No, Charles. This is our home, and I will not let the Whitmore name be stained by someone like her." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd, like wind stirring dry leaves. The reporters inhaled sharply. They knew this moment would be front-page news by morning. Maya raised her head. The chandelier light washed over her face, reflecting in her deep black eyes. Not anger, but the calm of a woman too familiar with battles. Her voice came quiet, yet clear, picked up by the microphone near the wedding cake. "Did you just call me a gold digger?" Eleanor arched an eyebrow. "I only spoke the truth." "Then allow me to remind you of another truth," Maya replied, her breath steady. "Gold never digs. It's forged and it's owned." A wave of whispers swept across the room. Some guests held their breath. Eleanor's smile faltered for just a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, the balance shifted. Inside Maya's mind, a voice whispered like prophecy. They want to see the black woman bow. Then they're about to learn how to kneel. She looked around the table. 12 faces, 12 masks polished by privilege. In their eyes, she saw not just disdain, but fear. Fear of what they couldn't control, the power of true ability. At the back of the room, Tasha clutched her serving tray tighter, her heart pounding. She had never seen anyone stand up to Eleanor. Yet this woman in a wedding gown that now looked more like armor stood tall, unflinching. Outside, snow began to fall over Chicago, mingling with the sound of wine being poured and the shallow breaths of the onlookers. Time itself seemed to slow. Maya lowered her head slightly, her voice softer now. I used to believe that honor was built on respect, but perhaps for some people it's only a curtain to hide their fear. Eleanor laughed, but the sound was brittle. You think you're clever? You're just a name that's new to money. You have no idea what legacy means. At that, Olivia Park, the journalist, lowered her camera and murmured to her colleague, "This isn't a wedding anymore, it's a declaration." A guest at the next table exhaled, "My God, she's challenging the entire family." In that moment, Maya was no longer just a bride. She was every woman ever belittled, every soul ever excluded from a table of power. And she knew every eye in the room now followed the rhythm of her heartbeat. The violin music resumed, faint and trembling, as if afraid of its own sound. Maya inhaled deeply and lifted her chin. "I don't need anyone's permission to sit here," she said quietly, yet each word fell like the strike of a hammer. "I'm here because I've earned it. And the worst thing you can do to me is force me to prove it to the world." Eleanor smirked. "Then prove it." Maya met her gaze, voice cold as steel. "I will." But not with words. In that instant, everyone could feel it. Something had shifted. Not just in this marriage, but in the balance of power within the entire room. In the far corner, the snow thickened. The chandelier's light flickered red and white, as if foretelling a storm that could no longer be stopped. And that night at the Whitmore family's wedding banquet, a woman began to rewrite the meaning of dignity. No one in the room dared to move. The words, "I will prove it," but not with words, still hung in the air, echoing like the aftermath of a declaration of war. The light from the crystal chandeliers reflected on Maya Carter's skin, making her look both fragile and terrifyingly resolute. In that moment, she was no longer the bride, in a white gown. She was an emblem rising amid a feast of people who believed power was a birthright. Eleanor Whitmore stood frozen, her face stiff, as if struck by an invisible slap. Her eyes darted around, searching for support among relatives who refused to meet her gaze. No one spoke. She despised that feeling, the hollow silence of authority cracking when people start to doubt the righteousness of the one in charge. Across the table, Jake Whitmore bowed his head, torn apart inside. He loved Maya, but that love was trapped between two walls, one being the mother who built the family name, the other, the woman he had sworn to protect. The conflict left him mute. And in that silence, Maya understood she was completely alone. She didn't need anyone to defend her. She never had. But she could feel something breaking, not just within the Whitmore family, but within the very foundation of a dynasty that thought it could never fall. A soft sound broke the stillness, the faint clink of a spoon against a glass. One guest, desperate to break the tension, forced a smile and said, "Come on now, this is a wedding. Let's drink to love." But before he could finish, Eleanor cut him off, her voice sharp and venomous. "Love don't make me laugh. This so-called love is a stain on the Whitmore name." The words strangled the air. Several guests quietly set their glasses down their eyes, meeting in silent agreement. They knew they were witnessing a tragedy unfold not between two women, but between two worlds. Maya looked at Eleanor, neither angry nor afraid. In her mind flashed memories of sleepless nights of projects she had built from nothing. She had been called too ambitious, too cold a woman who didn't know her place. She had heard it all and she had survived it all. But she never imagined that on what was supposed to be the happiest night of her life, she would have to hear those same words from the family of the man she loved. Eleanor leaned closer, her voice dropping just enough for everyone to hear. "You may have fooled my son with that white dress, but you'll never fool me. I know exactly what you want." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile. "Is that so, Mrs. Whitmore?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes brimming with disdain. "Money, power, and a place in society you could never reach without wearing our name." A dry laugh broke out from the end of the table. Lucas Jake's cousin tried to ease the tension with a joke. "Come on, Aunt Eleanor. If she were after money, she would have picked someone else. Jake's sweet, but he's no billionaire." A few guests chuckled weakly, but Maya didn't. She turned toward Lucas, her voice calm. "You're right. I didn't marry Jake for money. I married him because he was the first person who ever believed I didn't need anyone's permission to exist in this room." Jake lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and in that instant he realized he was no longer the protector. He had become the witness. Maya drew a deep breath. Inside, her emotions collided pain, anger, and a sorrow that cut deep to the bone. Yet beneath it all, a flame burned bright, the fire of self-respect. She rose to her feet, every movement deliberate, measured. All eyes followed. The soft rustle of silk echoed like the sound of defiance. "You're right about one thing," Maya said. "I wasn't born into luxury. I don't carry the Whitmore name. I don't have billionaire parents. But because of that, I had to learn how to stand on my own." She walked forward, stopping directly in front of Eleanor. The chandelier light reflected in Eleanor's eyes, still cold but flickering with the first sign of doubt. "Do you know what sets us apart, Mrs. Whitmore?" Maya asked softly. Eleanor let out a harsh laugh. "Are you here to teach me morals now?" "No," Maya replied, her voice low but steady. "I'm just here to remind you that power without integrity is only an illusion." The murmurs grew louder this time. At the back of the room, Tasha held her breath. She had never heard anyone speak to Eleanor Whitmore like that. Olivia Park, the reporter, discreetly pulled her microphone closer. She knew this was more than a family feud. This was a snapshot of an era, one where the world was learning to redefine who truly deserved a seat at the table of power. Eleanor tightened her grip on her wine glass, her expression darkening. "You should watch your tone in my house." "That's unfortunate," Maya replied softly, "because this house belongs to Carter Equity. Or did you forget I rented the entire hotel for tonight?" The words hit like thunder. Several guests snapped their heads up. Charles Whitmore frowned. "What did you just say?" Maya tilted her head slightly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "I've always believed that when people try to keep you out of their table, the best thing to do is buy the whole table." The air erupted. Guests whispered, cameras flashed. Jake sat frozen, torn between pride and fear. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh, her voice shaking with rage. "You think a few acquisition contracts make you one of us?" No, Maya said, her gaze sharp as steel. It makes you have to look me in the eye. In that moment, every divide disappeared. No longer bride and mother-in-law, no longer black and white. Only two women, each embodying an era, one collapsing, the other rising. Eleanor's teeth clenched, her voice a hiss between them. "You'll regret coming here." Maya's eyes blazed. "No, Mrs. Whitmore. Tonight it's you who will regret it." A long silence filled the room. Only the sound of snow falling outside remained soft and rhythmic, like the city's quiet breath. And at the far end of the room, Tasha held her tray of champagne, her heart swelling with something unfamiliar. Not fear, but hope. She had just witnessed something she never thought possible. A woman who refused to bow. A woman who wasn't given a seat at the table of power, but chose to rebuild it her own way. And in Tasha's eyes, Maya Carter was no longer just the bride of the evening. She had become the flame itself, and the night in Chicago began to burn bright. The faint chime of crystal glasses clinking together echoed through the golden ballroom like a warning bell of what was about to unfold. This was no longer a wedding reception. It was the beginning of a historic confrontation. In the middle of the lavish hall of the Lakeview Grand Hotel, everyone sat frozen, as if even the air itself was afraid to move. Eleanor Whitmore pressed her palm against the table, her eyes narrowing. She had destroyed many with a single look before, and she was certain she could do it again. "You're impressive, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with equal parts mockery and threat. "Not only did you steal my son's heart, but now you plan to steal my family's voice too." Maya stood still, serene as a statue, Her white dress seemed to reflect the light more brightly, as if it existed to defy the shadow of power hanging over the room. Her reply was measured, each word falling onto the cold marble table like a drop of iron. "I've stolen nothing. I'm simply reclaiming what others have deliberately denied respect." Eleanor let out a short, scornful laugh. "Respect, is that something you think can be bought?" "Respect," Maya answered softly, her tone low and steady, "is only lost by those who sell their souls for an illusion of status." Eleanor's hand froze. She was not used to being spoken to that way. For more than 40 years as the head of Whitmore Holdings, everyone had obeyed her without question. But today this woman, the bride of her own son, dared to strip her authority bare in front of them all. Charles Whitmore tried to intervene, his voice conciliatory. "Eleanor, we've discussed this. The wedding has happened. We should be grateful." "Silence, Charles." Eleanor snapped her words, slicing through the air. "You don't understand. This woman is a danger to the Whitmore name." Her outburst made several guests flinch. Olivia Park, a reporter for Society and Vows, tightened her grip on her camera. Through her lens, she saw that Maya didn't even blink. There was more than pain in her eyes. There was strategy. Olivia could feel it. Something had been planned long before tonight. At the back of the room, Serena Lopez Maya's assistant entered quietly. Dressed in a sleek black suit, her hair neatly tied back, she carried a tablet glowing with light. Tasha, the young black waitress, noticed the tension in Serena's eyes. "She's preparing something," Tasha whispered to a colleague beside her. No one answered. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice low but loud enough for all to hear. "I know your type. You climb your way up with tricks and backroom deals. You know nothing about legacy. We are Whitmore. You're just Carter, another name among the new money crowd." Maya didn't respond immediately. Her eyes moved across the table, taking in every frozen smile, every watchful gaze, waiting for her to break. Then she spoke slow and clear. You're right. I'm not a Whitmore. I'm a Carter. And just 2 weeks ago, Carter Equity completed a $950 million merger with Whitmore Holdings. The air exploded. Sharp breaths filled the room. Eleanor stiffened. What did you just say? Maya's voice didn't waver, not even slightly. You think you're talking to a bride. You're wrong. You're talking to your family's new controlling partner. Eleanor burst out laughing, the sound echoing like shattering glass. Don't tell me you think you control Whitmore because of a few ridiculous contracts. Maya tilted her head slightly, her smile calm as a whisper. Not ridiculous at all, Eleanor. That contract bears the signature of your attorney Richard Hale and the full approval of your board of directors. I was simply behind the scenes, just the way you like it. Right women belong behind, until everyone realizes who's actually steering the wheel. Eleanor's face turned pale. Charles shot to his feet. That's impossible, I'm afraid it's not. Maya replied evenly. It's already done. In the corner, Serena pressed a hand to her earpiece, her voice low. Protocol Red activation code is ready. Maya gave the smallest nod. Not yet, she whispered. Not time. The silence stretched like wire. Eleanor turned to her son. Jake, did you know about this? He shook his head weakly. No, I didn't, Mother. I swear I didn't know. Eleanor's glare cut through him like a blade. Useless, she muttered. This whole family is full of weaklings. A soft metallic clink broke the tension, the sound of a silver spoon falling from Tasha's trembling hand. She bent to pick it up, but her eyes never left Maya. For a fleeting second she realized she was witnessing history. Maya neither advanced nor retreated. She lifted her wine glass, the light flickering inside it like a tiny flame. Her voice rang out smooth and sharp. You said I don't belong at this table, Eleanor. Perhaps you're right. Because this table was built on privilege, on prejudice, on the illusion that power is an inheritance no one can challenge. But I came here to remind you, every empire has an expiration date, and tonight yours has arrived. Each word hit Eleanor like lead. Her fingers trembled around the stem of her glass. The entire room fell utterly silent. From beyond the tall windows, the soft sound of snow tapping against the glass filled the void, rhythmic and cold. Charles tried to speak, but Maya's voice cut through him. Don't bother explaining, Mr. Whitmore. I know that 2 weeks ago you approved the merger because you believed the Carter representative was a man. You never realized he was acting on my behalf. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia Park bent over her notebook, scribbling furiously. She already knew tomorrow's headline, Black Bride Seizes Husband's Family Empire, on her wedding night. Eleanor stepped back, her lips trembling. No, it can't be. I signed with someone else. No. Maya said, her smile faint and precise. You signed with me. A sharp crash rang out, the crystal glass in Eleanor's hand shattered. The sound of spilled wine mixed with the faint notes of a violin, turning into a mournful requiem. This game is over, Maya said. From now on, everyone in this room will learn one truth. When silence feeds arrogance, truth will always return to reclaim its place. Eleanor collapsed back into her chair, her face twisted with panic. For the first time in her life, her authority carried no weight. And at the far end of the room, Tasha whispered softly to herself, Dear God, she's not just a bride. She's the storm. And Maya, she stood there calm, amid the wreckage of shattered illusions, her gaze distant, yet certain. She knew this was only the overture, because after the sound of collapse always comes the echo of rebirth. That night, the wedding banquet ceased to be a celebration. It became a silent courtroom where truth reclaimed justice, and the woman once humiliated rose to become the judge of an empire. The violin in the corner had just begun to swell when it cut out abruptly, and a heavy silence fell. Everyone in the Lakeview Grand Ballroom seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who once made Chicago's financial world tremble, sat rigid, her eyes blazing. No one could recognize the former queen of high society. In front of her, Maya Carter stood tall, unnervingly calm. A glint of light flashed along the crystal stem in Eleanor's hand. She rose slowly, each movement radiating a practiced, hollow control, as if she still held the upper hand. "I think this party has gone on long enough," she said, her voice sliding between wine and pride. "Perhaps it is time to end this pretense." She lifted the bottle of red wine, filled her own glass, then, without warning, poured wildly into the next wine, spilling over her hand, past her fingers, down the stem froth, surging like blood. A thin laugh slipped from her lips. "You want acceptance, Maya. Let me help you blend into our color." Before anyone could react, Eleanor flicked her wrist. The red wine arced through the air and crashed into Maya. The sound of liquid striking fabric was stark. Deep crimson spread fast across the white dress, blooming like an open wound. A sharp intake of breath rippled from the guests, then whispers, then absolute silence. Jake Whitmore leapt up in horror. "Mother, stop her." But Eleanor only laughed, a sound brittle as falling crystal. Now she looks more fitting. The words dropped like stone, and under hundreds of eyes, Maya did not move. No cry, no tear. Only a steady low breath, as if she were holding the world in place under her feet. At the back, Tasha Bennett, the young black server, set down her tray, her hands shaking. In that instant, she no longer saw a CEO. She saw herself, and every woman ever humiliated, for daring to step into a place where others said she didn't belong. Maya looked down at the spreading stain. She touched it gentle as if touching a keepsake. Her fingers slid over the cold, sticky silk, yet her eyes remained bright, quiet, and deep. She spoke softly, the room's microphones catching every word. "You did more than spill wine, Eleanor. You just spilled every mask this family has ever worn." A soft gasp rose from the next table. Olivia Park, the reporter, felt her heart pound so hard she had to steady her phone. She knew the moment had shifted from social conflict to symbol. Eleanor laughed again, sour and cutting. "Is the performance over? Save that line for your boardroom?" Maya lifted her gaze, cutting straight through Eleanor. "My boardroom owns your boardroom." The room exploded into a noiseless uproar. No one dared move. A few guests bent their heads, pretending to fuss with napkins. Others turned away from the cameras, now pointing in their direction. Jake turned to his mother, panicked. "Mother, please stop! I am begging you!" Eleanor did not look at her son. She looked only at Maya. "You have won, have you? What do you gain by humiliating me?" "No," Maya said, her voice low, smooth as honed steel. "I have not won. I have simply refused to lose the way you wanted." In the corner, Tasha watched, her eyes full of pride. For the first time in her life, she saw someone stand straight before a symbol of power, without fear. Eleanor stepped back, her face flushed with rage. She gestured to the event manager. "Call security. I want her out of here." The manager hesitated. He looked to Charles, then to Maya, then back to Eleanor. The entire room seemed to be losing the hierarchy that had gone unquestioned for so long. "There is no need." Maya said, her voice so gentle it chilled. If anyone is leaving, it will not be me. A small voice rose from the back. Ms. Carter. It was Tasha. She took a step forward, gripping a folded towel. Would you like me to get you something to wipe that off? Maya turned and smiled. No, thank you. Let them see. Every eye fixed on her. The white gown stained red, mottled like a new flag. And in that precise moment, everyone in the room understood that the woman before them hadn't been defiled. She was transforming humiliation into an emblem. Charles braced a hand on the table, his voice rough. Maya, what do you want here? Money, fame, or Maya cut him off, her eyes cold and bright as metal. No, Mr. Whitmore. I want the truth. And the truth, no matter how many years it is buried under gold and silver, will always find a way to surface. Eleanor hissed. You are making a fool of yourself. No, Maya said. I am giving history a voice. Then she looked to Serena Lopez, her assistant, standing near the door. Serena. Serena nodded and tapped the tablet screen. A soft click sounded. The wall behind the head table blazed to life. Everyone turned. A massive screen had lit up. White light washed over stunned faces. Company logos appeared, spreadsheets, lines of electronic signatures, each document a precise piece of the merger between Carter Equity and Whitmore Holdings. Maya faced the room again, her voice clear through the microphone. You asked what I am here to do, Eleanor. I am here to show you yourself. Slide after slide advanced. Every number and clause landed like a verdict. Then the final line appeared. Whitmore Holdings, 51% of shares owned by Carter Equity Partners. The room erupted into murmurs. Eleanor stumbled back into a chair. No, impossible. This is forged. No, Maya said. This is reality. You signed it with your own hand. Richard Hale, the family attorney, bowed his head and could not meet a single gaze. Mrs. Whitmore, he said softly, the documents are valid. They were notarized 14 days ago. Eleanor turned to her husband, Charles. Did you know Charles only shook his head, his face ash-grey? I thought it was a secondary deal. A harsh squeal burst from the speakers as a microphone was jostled. Maya stepped closer to the head table projection light, washing her face until she looked like a judge beneath the lamps. You said I do not belong here, she said. But the truth is, this place now belongs to me. The line echoed through the hall. Olivia Park felt her skin prickle. She knew a new page had just been written, not on paper, but inside the people who witnessed it. Eleanor dropped into her chair, her breath ragged. Wine spilled across the floor, catching the glow from the screen, spreading like a red streak that seemed to redraw the outline of power. And in the midst of that overwhelming room, Maya Carter was no longer a humiliated bride. She was the one in command, the storm that had begun to sweep through an empire once thought untouchable. The light from the projection washed over the entire room like a tidal wave. Every face that had long hidden in the shadows of power was now exposed down to every wrinkle and flicker of emotion. Numbers, graphs, and signatures kept flashing one after another, a storm of light revealing the truth for everyone to see. Eleanor Whitmore sank into her chair, her hands crushing the white napkin until it wrinkled and twisted. Her face drained of color, then flared red with fury. "Turn that off!" she shouted, her voice cracking. But no one moved. No one dared defy her. From the doorway, Serena Lopez walked forward, the sound of her heels echoing evenly on the marble floor. She held a tablet in her hand, her tone crisp and composed. "Protocol Red is active, Miss Carter. All data has been verified and is streaming to the internal media network." The entire hall went silent. Every gaze turned toward Maya Carter, who stood at the center of the ballroom, like the still point of a quiet explosion. She gave a small nod. "Continue, Serena." Eleanor jolted upright and lunged toward the table. "You have no right." Maya turned her head, her voice still soft, but each word cutting like glass. "I have every right, Eleanor. And do you know why? Because you signed them all away yourself." The entire ballroom trembled. A few guests hunched their shoulders, lowering their heads. Others exchanged glances, faces caught between horror and awe. They were witnessing the fall of an empire in real time, and they knew history would not repeat this moment again. Serena's fingers moved swiftly across the tablet, launching the second sequence. The screen shifted to a deep crimson background. Large words appeared. Protocol read disclosure. Sequence initiated. Then came images, documents, signatures, notes. A video began playing, showing secret meetings between Whitmore Holdings and its subsidiaries' money transfers into untraceable accounts, falsified contracts. Every new frame drew sharp, audible breaths from the crowd. Charles Whitmore rose, his face pale with disbelief. "Eleanor, my God, all of this." Eleanor backed away, her expression collapsing. "No, I didn't know she had this. Who gave you permission?" Maya cut her off, her eyes, never leaving hers. "No one gave me permission. I gave it to myself." A wave of tension rippled across the hall. Jake, the newlywed husband, stared at Maya with a look torn between admiration and fear. He whispered, "You planned all of this." She didn't look at him. "Not a plan, Jake. A defense. Because I knew this night would come." She turned back to Eleanor, her voice dropping lower, carrying across the room. "You called me a gold digger, but you forgot that deep underground gold is forged under pressure. And tonight you created that pressure yourself." The projection shifted again to the final image, a shareholder chart. One undeniable line appeared across the massive screen. Carter Equity Partners, 51% controlling interest in Whitmore Holdings. A long gasp swept through the ballroom. Olivia Park, the journalist, could barely keep her hand steady enough to film. She realized she was recording the greatest power shift Chicago had ever seen. Eleanor froze, her hands trembling. She turned to her husband. "Charles, do something. We have to stop this." Charles shook his head, his voice hoarse and broken. "It's impossible. The contract is binding. You signed it, and it was notarized before the board." Eleanor staggered, her shoulders shaking. "No, I thought it was a minor deal." Maya walked toward her. Each step echoed like the toll of fate against the marble floor. She stopped a few feet away, her voice low, but carrying with clarity. "There is no such thing as a minor deal when the price is human arrogance." Suddenly, Serena glanced at the screen, her voice tense but controlled. "Ms. Carter, the stream has gone live. Elite Business News is broadcasting this feed nationwide. There are over 200,000 viewers." The room froze. Eleanor spun around, screaming, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" But Olivia Park had already raised her camera, her voice trembling with excitement. "It can't be stopped. The whole country is watching." And at that moment, the lights in the room dimmed until only the glow of the screen remained, spilling across Maya's face. In that light, the red stain on her dress flared bright, no longer shame, but triumph. Maya lifted her head. I stayed silent long enough for them to believe I would never fight back, but tonight her eyes swept across the crowd. I'm not only standing up for myself, I'm standing up for everyone who has ever been told they don't belong at the table. Tasha Bennett, the young server, clenched her fists, emotion flooding through her like a rising tide. She had never imagined that a black woman could turn a banquet into a tribunal, could turn humiliation into strategy. Eleanor collapsed back into her chair, her vision swimming. "You think you can destroy me with a few documents?" Maya stepped closer, her tone sharp and cold. "No, Eleanor. I'm not destroying you. I'm just pulling back the curtain so everyone can see who really holds the power." She turned towards Serena and nodded. "Activate the final file." The screen shifted again. A video began to play an audio recording from a Whitmore Holdings board meeting, featuring Eleanor's own voice declaring, "I don't care about diversity or social equality. I want people who look like us on the executive team." Her words reverberated through the silent hall. Each sentence landed like a hammer, striking the tombstone of her empire. Maya said nothing. She let Eleanor's own voice finish her downfall. A guest whispered, "My God, she planned everything." Another answered softly, "No, she just brought the truth to light." Serena turned to Maya, her eyes bright. "Do you want me to stop it?" Maya shook her head. "No. Let them hear it all." When the video ended, the screen faded to black, leaving only one line in white letters across it. "Respect is not inherited. It is earned." The lights flicked back on, but the atmosphere had changed, colder, sharper, truer. Maya turned to face Eleanor one last time. Her voice no longer carried anger, but a solemn, commanding calm. "You once said I don't belong here. Perhaps you were right. But what you failed to understand is this. When I enter a room, I bring my world with me. And that world just changed yours." Applause broke out from the back, faint at first, then swelling. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of people witnessing justice being born through pain. Tasha was the first to stand, tears glimmering in her eyes. Olivia kept recording her hands, trembling from emotion. And Eleanor, she sat motionless, her eyes reflecting the last light from the fading screen like the sunset of a dynasty. And at the center of it all, Maya Carter stood alone. Not as a bride, not as a victor, but as a witness to the rebirth of justice on the very night power thought itself eternal. The air inside the Lakeview Grand Ballroom felt thick enough to break. Moments ago, the elite guests had been applauding. Now they sat perfectly still, eyes glued to the fading screen. A few whispered to one another, low and shaky, like the creak of an old house about to collapse. Eleanor Whitmore gripped the armrest. Her face flushed, her breath ragged, as if she might fall. The diamond bracelet on her wrist trembled under the chandelier, the light of luxury now reflecting like a taunt. She sprang up, pointed at Maya, and hissed through her teeth, "You think a few cheap tricks can bring me down? I built this empire with honor, with sweat, with my family's blood." Maya Carter did not step back. She looked straight at the woman, her gaze calm, yet cold as metal. "No, Eleanor. You built it on the silence of those you pressed down by turning justice into privilege, and tonight that silence has expired." A shiver moved through the room. Jake, the newlywed husband, sat stunned, head-bowed hands, shaking on his knees. He no longer knew where to stand with the mother who raised him, or the woman who had torn apart the illusion of power around him. Eleanor stepped closer to Maya, her voice grinding low. "You do not understand. There are provisions in that contract you cannot control." Maya's smile was faint, as if she had waited her whole life for that line. "You mean Clause 47B, do you not?" Eleanor froze, her eyes widening. "How do you know?" "Because Maya cut in. I am the one who added it, before sending you the final signature copy. The room erupted in startled murmurs. Charles Whitmore exhaled, his voice gone rough. "Eleanor, did you not read the contract carefully?" Eleanor stepped back, her face bleaching. "No, I had Richard review it." Attorney Richard Hale sat at the end of the table, head-bowed, voice unsteady. "That clause was added in Appendix C on corporate ethics. I thought it was only a communications requirement." Maya took one more step, her voice ringing clear. "No, it is not only communications. Clause 47B states that any public discriminatory act by an executive that can impact shareholder reputation will trigger a full transfer of all voting rights to the remaining partner." A few guests gaped. The whispering spread like surf. Olivia Park, the reporter, hardly dared blink her camera, capturing every word and breath. Eleanor screamed, "Impossible! No one is allowed to write a clause like that into my contract." "But you signed it," Maya replied, her tone hardening each word a blade. "And tonight you activated it in front of hundreds of witnesses and millions watching live." A soft crash sounded as the crystal in Eleanor's hand fell and shattered. Serena Lopez, standing near the control table, turned to Maya. "Ms. Carter, the Corporate Ethics Committee is requesting a direct link. They want to confirm activation of Clause 47B. Maya nodded once. "Connect them." In a blink, the screen behind her flared back to life. A window opened. Dr. Alan Pierce, chair of the Ethics Committee, sat with board members in a conference room with the Corporate Compliance Authority emblem behind them. "Good evening, Ms. Carter," he said, voice steady. "We have watched the entire live broadcast. Under the terms filed with our office, the public discriminatory and insulting conduct of Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore has activated Clause 47B. Would you like us to confirm transfer of voting rights now?" Eleanor shouted, "I object. I do not permit this." Maya answered without taking her eyes off the screen. "Please proceed and record everything in the legal file." Dr. Pierce nodded. Understood. He turned to the board, his tone decisive. By regulation, operational control and all voting rights of Whitmore Holdings are transferred to Carter Equity Partners, effective immediately. A shock rolled through the hall. Many gasped without sound. Eleanor seemed drained of life, collapsing into her chair, fingers clawing at the table. Charles murmured, "My God, it is all over." Dr. Pierce continued, his voice, even over the speakers. "We will issue an official statement within 12 hours. Any action to obstruct this process will be treated as interference with legal enforcement." The screen dimmed and went black, leaving the room in a silence, heavy as stone. Maya turned to Eleanor. She did not speak at once, only watched the woman who had once dominated every room, now trembling and undone at her own banquet. At last she spoke slowly. "No one stole anything from you, Eleanor. You lost it when you chose insult over respect." Eleanor lifted her head, eyes wet, yet burning with hate. "You will regret this, Maya. The world will not stand with you." Maya gave a small smile. "Perhaps, but the truth will." Jake rose and moved toward her. "Maya, please stop. You have won. She cannot take any more." She looked at him, her eyes soft, with a trace of pity but unyielding. "Jake, I did not come here to win. I came to end a way of behaving." He gripped her hand, his voice shaking. "But you are destroying my family." She looked at his hand around hers, the same hand that had held her in their ceremony, now warm, yet distant. She withdrew gently. "No, Jake. Your family destroyed itself long ago, when it believed blood mattered more than dignity." A few guests bowed their heads. A woman whispered, "She is right." Eleanor clutched her chest, gasping. Richard Hale rushed to steady her. "Mrs. Whitmore, please try to breathe." Eleanor jerked away and screamed, "Get out, all of you! She will never be a Whitmore." Maya answered quietly, her voice even quivering only with restraint. "That is true, Eleanor. I'm not a Whitmore, and thank God for that." The chandelier above swayed faintly. The crystals cast scattered light across the floor, mingling with the dried red stain on her dress, forming a strange glow that looked like a wound and a coronation at the same time. Olivia Park lowered her camera eyes wet. She knew this scene reached far beyond one personal story. This was a moment corporate ethics would remember, a woman standing up on the night they tried to break her, forcing the world to look at the stain of power. Eleanor bent forward, her shoulders shaking. She tried to speak, but could not. Every excuse had turned meaningless. Maya stepped back and drew a deep breath. She did not smile, she did not celebrate. Her face held only quiet, the quiet of someone who knows that true justice is never loud. Outside, snow kept falling. White flakes drifted past the windows and melted in the warm glow of the chandeliers like small spirits, cleansing a room that had just witnessed a turn of the century in the balance of power. And at the center of it all, Maya Carter still stood straight, not as a conqueror, but as the keeper of the boundary between power and dignity, a boundary that tonight she had redrawn with her own hands. The whispers were gone. Only the faint, trembling notes of a half-finished violin piece lingered in the air, thin and fragile, like a thread hanging over an abyss. Everyone in the grand ballroom had seen it. Eleanor Whitmore was no longer the queen of this night. The power that once surrounded her like walls of gold had crumbled into dust. Maya Carter stood in the center of the room, her dress stained with the deep color of dried wine, the light reflecting across each fold like veins pulsing beneath her skin. She didn't need to speak anymore. The silence itself had already rendered its judgment. Eleanor remained seated, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. She looked at Maya with eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. Her voice, thin and breaking, scraped out from her throat. "You may have shares, contracts, and all those people watching online, but you will never have what my family has reputation, legacy bloodline." Maya stepped closer, her heels gliding softly over the marble floor. She stopped just a step away and said quietly, "A reputation built on exclusion is nothing more than a beautiful wall hiding rot within." Eleanor lifted her head, her tone sharp as a knife. "You think you're better than me?" Maya shook her head, her smile light as air. "No, I'm just different. I built mine with human effort, not through the fear of others." At the nearby table, a few guests lowered their heads. Those who once stood to greet Eleanor now avoided her gaze. They were beginning to realize that true power did not come from blood, but from character. Jake, the man sitting silently beside them, finally spoke. His voice was small, weak, yet clear enough to pierce through the hush. "Maya, stop. You've proven enough." She turned toward him, her look freezing him in place. There was no anger in her eyes, only a gentle, aching disappointment. "I don't need to prove anything, Jake. I'm just letting the truth speak for itself, instead of being buried beneath the Whitmore name." He took a step forward, his voice hoarse. "I didn't know my mother would do this. I didn't know she would humiliate you like that." She pressed her lips together. "No, Jake. You did know. You've heard the way they talked about me for months, and you stayed silent. That silence isn't innocent. It's a kind of complicity." Jake stood frozen, every excuse dying on his tongue. In that instant, he realized that What he'd lost wasn't just the woman he'd married, but the chance to stand on the right side of history. At the corner of the room, Tasha Bennett, the young server, gripped the tray in her hands, then took a deep breath and stepped into the light. Her voice trembled, but it carried clearly. I heard everything. I was near the table when Mrs. Whitmore called her a gold digger, and I heard her say she'd never let someone like her sit at the same table. I can't pretend I didn't hear it. The room froze. Every head turned toward Tasha. Eleanor glared at her, furious. "How dare you?" Tasha nodded, tears streaming down her face, but her voice stronger now. "Yes, I dare. Because if I don't speak, my silence makes me part of this humiliation." A wave of applause broke out. At first one person, then another, then dozens more. The sound wasn't thunderous, but steady, like a tide cleansing the room. Maya raised a hand gently, and the applause faded. "Don't clap for me," she said. "Clap for courage. Because the world doesn't change through rage, it changes because ordinary people dare to speak the truth when it matters most." Tasha lowered her head, laughing and crying at once. In her eyes, Maya was no longer just a powerful CEO. She was a symbol of belief. Eleanor slammed her palm on the table and shot to her feet. "You're turning my celebration into a media circus. You're bribing my staff." Maya answered slowly, each word falling like stone. "No, Eleanor, I don't bribe. I invest in people. And the tragedy is that your entire family, with all its wealth and prestige, never learned how to do that." Eleanor trembled, unable to speak. The chill in the room seeped into her breath. Charles, her husband, placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice raspy. "Eleanor, stop. She's right. We've let pride drown our reason." Eleanor shook him off her face, blurred under the chandelier light. "Be quiet. You'd let them humiliate me like this." Charles said nothing. He only sighed, the kind of sigh that carries the weight of a lifetime of illusions. Maya turned to Tasha. "What's your name, Tasha Bennett, Mom?" Maya nodded. "Starting tomorrow, Carter Equity will contact you. I want you on the human relations team. Someone brave enough to tell the truth deserves to be heard." Tasha's eyes widened, her voice breaking. I don't know what to say." Maya smiled softly. "You don't need to say anything. Just stay honest, and you've already done the right thing." Around them, the guests began whispering again, but this time there was no mockery, only admiration. They were watching a woman transform small acts into a force of change. Eleanor watched the scene, bitterness flooding her chest. She tried to stand tall, but her shoulders trembled. "You're buying people's loyalty. Do you really think the world will always be on your side?" Maya turned her tone light but firm. "I don't need the world to stand with me. I only need it to remember what it saw tonight." Olivia Park panned her camera, capturing the moment. In her frame stood two women, one whose power had collapsed, one whose dignity had risen, facing each other like light and shadow. And between them, Maya's wine-stained gown glowed like an emblem, pain worn as armor. Jake sat back down, his eyes hollow. He knew this marriage was over, but he also knew he had just witnessed a rebirth. Maya looked around the room, her voice calm and steady. "Some people think power is a weapon. It's not. True power is the ability to control yourself when others try to make you lose who you are. You can call me whatever you want, Eleanor, but tonight you've taught me something valuable. Dignity doesn't need to be granted. It's forged in fire, and I've walked through yours without burning." Eleanor said nothing. The crowd was silent. The only sound came from the snow falling outside, tapping gently against the glass like the heartbeat of a world beginning to change. Maya drew a deep breath and looked to Serena. "Connect with the board. It's time for the official announcement." Serena nodded, her eyes bright. She tapped the screen, and new light rippled across the room. Maya turned back, her gaze resting on Eleanor one last time, the woman still trying to hold her head high, even as her crown lay shattered. "You call this a downfall," Maya said quietly. "I call it the first step toward change." The light reflected on Maya's face, igniting the red stain on her gown until it blazed like fire. And in that moment, amid the wreckage of a once untouchable dynasty, she became the living symbol of something Eleanor could never understand, the strength of a woman who stands tall in the very storm, meant to break her. The light from the projection splintered across the ceiling, breaking into red and gold bands like flames dancing on white silk. The room that once stood for authority now lay bare, exposing truth and guilt alike. No one spoke. The sounds of breath of hearts, beating of wine, dripping from a shattered glass on the floor, blended together like the final count of an era. Maya Carter remained at the center, the light catching the dried wine on her gown until it looked like a red breastplate. Outside the windows, snow fell in silence, but inside the air was thick the way smoke hangs after an explosion. Serena Lopez stepped forward, her voice low and decisive. "Ms. Carter, the live connection is ready. The entire board and the oversight body are watching in real time." Maya nodded. "Activate." The screen shifted again. A long conference table appeared with the emblem of Carter Equity Partners behind it. The serious faces of the board reflected the blue glow of their monitors. At the center sat Dr. Alan Pierce, chair of the Corporate Ethics Committee, the man who had just ordered the transfer of voting control. His voice came through the speakers, steady and clear. "Ms. Carter, the committee confirms that Clause 47B is now in effect. Operational control of Whitmore Holdings is officially vested in Carter Equity. To complete the process, we require your public acceptance of all assets and associated legal responsibilities." Maya was quiet for a moment. She looked around the room once, a gilded banquet hall, now a tribunal of ethics. Her eyes moved across the faces, the aging moguls, the socialite wives, the people who had laughed when Eleanor humiliated her, and who now lowered their eyes to avoid her gaze. Then she said, "I accept. But I do not accept to rule. I accept to repair." A soft sigh rose from somewhere like release. It was cut off at once by Eleanor Whitmore's voice, hoarse and bitter. "You speak so nobly. You are only taking revenge. You want to destroy me, to destroy our name. Is that it?" Maya turned back, her gaze gentled, but there was a depth in it, like a drop into a chasm. "No, Eleanor. I do not need to destroy you. You have done that yourself. I am only turning on the light so everyone can see." A click sounded as Serena advanced the slide. The screen now showed new provisions: Corporate Transparency and Governance Equality Code, Carter Equity Edition, year 2025. Maya continued. "Beginning tomorrow, every subsidiary of Whitmore Holdings will undergo a full review of its personnel policies. Compensation promotion, the right to speak everything, will be evaluated on merit, not on bloodlines or privilege." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Olivia Park, the reporter, bent over her notes. She knew she was hearing the declaration of a new era. Eleanor sprang up with a brittle laugh. "You are turning my company into a charity." Maya answered, her voice light yet firm as stone. "No, I am turning it into a place where people are respected." Eleanor's fists tightened. Her lips trembled. You think the world will adore you for a few moral lines. Trust me, Maya, by tomorrow they will forget you. People always forget the ones who teach the hardest lessons. Maya smiled faintly. Perhaps, but they do not forget the lesson. She turned to Serena. Alert communications. I want the press release issued the moment this reception ends. Headline: Respect has no color. Serena nodded, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen. In the corner, several reporters began calling in, breaking updates. Jake, who had been motionless, finally stood. His voice shook rough with strain. Maya, stop. You are burying them. My family, my mother. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. Jake, I am not burying anyone. I am setting them down on the ground where they should have stood from the beginning. He stepped closer, trying to take her hand. I love you, but this is no longer love. This is war. Maya held his gaze a long time, then gently withdrew her hand. No, Jake. This is how the world finds its way back to fairness. If that feels like war to you, perhaps you have been standing on the wrong side. Eleanor began to cry. It was not the sound of pain, but the sound of collapse, ragged and halting like a statue cracking. Charles moved to hold her, but his hand shook so badly he could barely support anyone. Maya watched them not with triumph, but with a quiet sorrow. Sorrow for people who had let pride make them relics in a world already turning. Her voice lowered. I once admired the Whitmores. I believed legacy was a noble thing. Tonight, I understand. This legacy is not in blood. It is in action. And your actions, Eleanor, have turned that legacy into a warning. The room held its breath. Olivia Park swallowed hard. A guest wiped away tears. Tasha, the server whispered to the person beside her. She is doing what hundreds dream of doing. She is making arrogance bow its head. Or its... Serena handed Maya a wireless microphone. Ms. Carter, the major networks are ready. Would you like to give closing remarks? Maya nodded slightly, then faced the cameras. Her voice was low and unhurried, each word carving the air like a vow. Tonight is not a collapse. It is a transfer from power to dignity, from silence to transparency, from arrogance to learning. And if the world is watching, remember this. No one is stripped of the right to be respected unless they sell it themselves. The chandelier above glittered. Snow outside kept falling white as new paper. In that room, faces that once defined the old order were bowed, not in defeat, but because they had been seen. Eleanor said nothing more. She only looked at Maya, her eyes clouded, yet holding something between bitterness and acknowledgement. Perhaps for the first time, she realized that the woman before her, the bride she had called a gold digger, had become the person redefining the standards by which she had lived her entire life. Maya turned away, the projection light catching her back and drawing a halo around her. She did not speak again. She took one long breath, feeling the cold thread in from the doors, and walked slowly, step by step, across the tiles reflecting the golden sheen of victory. Not the victory of vengeance, but the victory of awakening. And when the doors opened and snow gusted in to mingle with the ballroom's light, people felt as if they were watching an old era dissolve, and a new world being born right there, from the dried red wine on the white gown she wore. The grand doors of the Lakeview Grand swung open, and a cold gust of wind swept in, carrying with it tiny flakes of snow that scattered across the marble floor. Maya Carter stepped out of the ballroom, where the golden light still flickered behind her, like the last breath of a fading celebration. The noise of voices, cameras, and murmurs still echoed in the distance. Yet inside her, everything had already fallen silent. Serena Lopez walked beside her holding an umbrella, but Maya gently pushed it aside. "No need," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let it fall. I want to feel it." She tilted her head upward, letting the snow dissolve against her skin. In that cold, something inside her felt washed clean, not her anger but the weight she had carried. She no longer felt like a victor, only a woman who had walked through fire and somehow kept her heart intact. Behind her, Tasha Bennett came running still, wearing her stained service uniform. "Miss Carter," she called, her voice breaking. "They're saying you've changed everything, and they said I really got the job. Is it true?" Maya turned and smiled. "Yes, you were brave, and the world needs people who dare to stand up the way you did." Tasha bit her lip, tears mingling with the snow. "Thank you for making silence no longer safe." Across the street, dozens of reporters kept clicking their cameras. One captured the moment Maya's silhouette walking through the snowfall, her wine-stained dress glowing beneath the streetlights. Within minutes, the photo would spread across news outlets under the headline, "The Woman Who Made Power, Beau." Maya stopped at the top of the steps. The city of Chicago stretched before her, its skyline gleaming through the snow towers rising like lighthouses for a new era. Serena spoke quietly. "Do you regret it?" Maya shook her head. "No. Regret only comes when we do wrong. All I did was bring light to what was hidden." She glanced back at the hotel one last time. Inside, the lights were dimming. The figure of Eleanor still sat there, small, solitary, surrounded by a room that had once belonged to her. Then Maya turned away. Her footsteps pressed faint marks into the snow, fading slowly with the wind. But those who had witnessed the night knew that each step marked the beginning of a new path, one where justice was no longer a luxury, and dignity no longer a decoration. Through the falling snow, Maya whispered softly, as if speaking to herself. "No one is truly free until they dare to speak what is right." And then she walked on into the white expanse of the night, leaving behind the echo of an evening that had forever changed the course of history. The next morning, Chicago was covered in a pure white blanket of snow. The first light of day streamed through the glass windows of Carter Equity headquarters, where Maya Carter stood silently gazing out at the city. Outside, the streets were coming alive again, but for Maya, everything felt slower. She could hear the wind moving past, and in that stillness, she realized that while an empire had fallen, dignity had just been rebuilt. Serena Lopez entered the room handing her the morning newspaper. Across the front page, the headline read in bold letters, "The Carter Reckoning." The night power kneeled. Maya glanced over it, then smiled faintly. She didn't feel pride, only peace. Every word on that paper was not a trophy of victory, but evidence of a truth finally spoken. She turned to Serena. "Send a message to the board. I want to establish the Eleanor Whitmore Scholarship Fund for students who have been denied opportunities because of prejudice. Let her name mean something different." Serena nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. Maya turned back toward the window, watching as the city glowed beneath the clear post-storm sky. Sunlight weaving through the air like golden threads, stitching together the wounds of the night before. She took a deep breath and spoke softly, as if to herself, yet to the world as well. "Power may collapse, but respect must be rebuilt every single day." And as the sunlight poured through the window reflecting in her eyes, Maya Carter smiled the smile of a woman who had walked through darkness and become her own light. From the perspective of an expert in leadership ethics and corporate culture, The journey of Maya Carter is not merely a story of power and consequence, but a powerful reminder that dignity cannot be taken, only surrendered. When a woman dares to turn humiliation into truth and chooses transparency over revenge, she proves that justice does not need to shout it, only needs light. If you believe that respect and equality are the true foundations of every success, then like this video to share that message, subscribe to the channel, so you never miss stories where courage is tested against power, and comment the phrase that reflects your belief: hold dignity.